Hi everyone, Christine Lewis here. Welcome to session 8, the final session of my truth study. Okay, in this session, what I've decided to do is this. I'm going to break it up into two parts because there's no way that I can conclude this study in one little 15-minute session. So I'm pushing the boat out. What the heck? Live dangerous, I say. I'm going to do it in two parts and I'll try and post them back to back, but we'll sort of have to see how that one goes. The title of this session is The Truth That Makes Us Free, which propels us out of the book of Genesis and into John chapter 8. My intent for this part of the session is to get us to verses 31 and 32, which reads like this. Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Oh, it's like ointment to your soul, isn't it? Bless God. In part 2, we'll start there and then we'll sort of try and journey beyond it and hopefully, sort of bring us into land and bring us to the conclusion of the study. Right. The context in which Jesus spoke these words is the context of identity. Jesus is actually talking about the freedom that we come into when we are rightly related to our Father. Not only rightly related to our Father, actually, but related to the right Father. Later on, post verses 31 and 32, Jesus says to these Jews who had believed in him, "You are of your father, the devil." I mean, you got to give it to him, haven't you? What's he like, our lovely Jesus? And so what I'm saying is the context in which he's speaking these wonderful words is the context of identity, as I say, that we're rightly related to our Father and related to the right Father. Now, after doing this study, and just let me say, that these are only just like little 15-minute sessions, but behind each 15-minute session, there are hours, let me tell you, of study. And so you only have a little snapshot, a little snippet of what has gone before. And so I've decided I'm going to gather up the study. I'm going to self-publish it, the complete study. And if you are inclined, you could get that, in a few weeks' time. You can get that and maybe sort of revisit these videos and do the two things together. How good, I might even do it, myself. Anyway. So, but in doing these studies, all the hours that I've spent in the Word, what the conclusion that I've come to, people, is this: that all truth, as heaven defines truth, either directly or indirectly, is about the restoration of the truth of who our Father is. That's what truth is all about. It's always about restoring us in some way, in some capacity, to the truth of who he is. Who he is for us, in us and to us, who we are for him, in him and to him, who he has been, who he is and who he always will be. And I've also realised this, that every ongoing captivity that you and I experience in our world is due to an ongoing violation of this truth, that somewhere within us there is an ongoing, persistent lie about who our Father is and our relation to him. But once those lies are exposed, which is what Jesus is doing here in John chapter 8, once these lies are exposed and we are willing to give them up, because it's always two-way with God, and we are willing to give the lie up, then that which held us captive is taken captive. The word says that Jesus led captivity captive. Bless our beautiful, lovely Jesus. And so here's what we're going to do. Before we get to verse 31, I want to run through the events that precipitated these words, because what I found is that this whole chapter, deliciously so, takes us on this remarkable journey of a he said, they said dialogue. And what we see is that Jesus is so clearly way ahead of the scribes and the Pharisees. Not just one step, he's way ahead. His hands are firmly on the wheel. He's in full control. He's driving the whole dialogue in the direction of his choosing, which, as we've just seen, is the question of identity. So then in verses 1 through to 12, Jesus is in the temple, isn't he, and the scribes, the Pharisees, bring the woman who was caught in adultery to him and, trying to catch him out, to stone her or not to stone. What shall we do, Jesus, And Jesus just stoops over, the word says, and he gets his finger and he begins to write in the sand. And this, people, is a beautiful snapshot of his deity. Because, and we often miss this, because in the Old Testament, whenever God writes anything, he writes with his finger. And he is Jesus with his finger, writing away in the sand. We get caught up with, what was it he was writing? No, forget that. Just enjoy this little snapshot of his deity. Bless Jesus. So anyway, he then sort of lifts himself up and he says to these accusers, doesn't he, you who are without sin, cast the first stone, and they all hold their head in shame and walk away, and rightly so. And Jesus just says to this woman, has no one condemned you? She says, no, master. And he says, well, neither do I. Now you go and sin no more. And so she exits the scene. Okay, so the drama for the moment is over. And then Jesus turns around to the crowd and he begins, the next sort of session, if you like. And he says these words. He says, I am the light of the world. Now, this is an identity declaration. Anything that follows those two words, I am, is an identity declaration. They respond to this declaration by really saying these words. They say that he is bearing witness. They say that he is bearing witness of himself and his witness is not true. Jesus responds to the accusation by simply talking about his Father and his relation to his Father, which leads them to ask the question, where is your Father? And actually, he begins to lead them into a series of questions. And I love this, because this is just what the Holy Spirit does. We often think that our questions are these random things, and the question comes first. We ask the question and then God answers. No, the word says this, I think it's in the book of Isaiah. He says, before you call, I will answer. The Holy Spirit is always leading us to the point where we will ask certain questions at certain times. Why? Because the answer is present, waiting for us to appropriate. It's marvellous. It's a marvellous work of the Spirit. And so Jesus is leading them to ask these questions. And he's leading them for a reason, because he's taking them to a specific somewhere that they'll only get to by asking specific questions. And this is one of them. Where is your Father? And so Jesus, infuriatingly, I'm sure, does not give them a direct answer. He says, you don't know me or my Father. So they're sort of like left there hanging, aren't they, really? Verse 21, Jesus then goes on to say, I'm going away and you'll seek me and you'll die in your sin, because where I'm going, you can't come. He's still responding to this question. You see, he's still leading them. His hands on that wheel and he's leading them, because the question was, where is your Father? He's saying, where I'm going, you can't come. And they sort of say to themselves, I think he's going to kill himself. Go figure. Oh, you have to laugh, don't you, at some of the things. Anyway, verse 23 and 24, Jesus continuing on the where issue. He says to them, you are from beneath, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. If you don't believe I am he, then you'll die in your sins. Which prompts the next question. Well, who are you? Can you see he's manoeuvring them into this place that he needs to get them to, so that he can confront them about the lie that they are hosting about their identity. Verse 25 and 26, again, no direct answer. And so, Jesus just says to them, just what I've been saying to you from the beginning. So again, no direct answer. He's not playing cat and mouse. He's leading them, like I've just said, to a specific somewhere. And so Jesus then returns to talking to them about the Father and his dependency on the Father. Verse 27 says that at this point, the people who were listening to him really didn't know that he was talking about the Father. Oh, bless our lovely God. Verses 28, 29. Again, Jesus begins to talk again about the Father and his dependency on the Father, concluding with these words. He says, I always do those things that please him. Now, this really is a defining moment, because verse 30 says this, as he spoke these words, many believed him. Now, this is very interesting, what happens next. The word believe actually means to commit one's trust to, or to place one's confidence in. Let me tell you what Jesus doesn't do to these many Jews who had committed their trust to him and placed their confidence in him. What he didn't do was send the disciples out with a welcome back, a big hug and a kiss, welcome to the family, brothers, big high five. No, he doesn't do any of that. Listen to what he does. Jesus just takes the whole dialogue up a gear, and he immediately speaks to, these are the Jews now who believed in him. He immediately speaks to them and challenges them on their identity, specifically on who their Father is. We've just read it. He said to them, okay, this is the beginning of the challenge to these Jews who believed in him. Jesus said to those Jews who believed in him, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Now, okay, these words on the face of it are pretty harmless. They're inoffensive. In fact, they're quite inspirational, I would say, or instructional. You know, Jesus is on a mission, and he's on a mission to expose the lies, like I say, concerning their identity that they've been believing. So, far from these words being harmless, far from these words being inoffensive, let me tell you what these words are, people, in reality. These words are a grenade with the pin pulled out that he is just hurling into their midst to blow up and set to confusion and put on the run these generational lies concerning their identity. And they knew it. They, judging by their reaction, they knew that Jesus had set something alight amongst them. Okay, they answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been in bondage to anyone. Hello, Egypt, Babylon, Persia. How can you say you will be made free? What a reaction. Let's have a quick look at the stuff that makes up this reaction. One, they're offended. We know they're offended because the very first reaction to offence is defence. So they are offended. They feel under threat. Their heredity is being threatened. Jesus never mentioned it, by the way. They're the ones who brought it up. We're Abraham's descendants, but they sense from these words that their heredity is being threatened. They feel destabilised. The ground of what they know or what they think they know is being shaken beneath them. Jesus is trying to rewrite their history, and they're challenged because all these Jews have ever known is a one-dimensional identity up to this point. All they've known is a corporate identity. Which is why probably they've never known an individual personal sense of identity, have they, with the Lord, which is probably why they get so mad with Jesus when they hear him talking about my father, my papa, my Abba, my daddy, They probably want to strangle him when they hear him talking like that, when all they've got is this sort of general, impersonal, corporate sense of identity. And so they finally become confrontational. How can you say we'll be made free? They were sort of like rabbits caught in the headlight, weren't they? The lie was sort of being exposed. They were caught with a lie and they really didn't quite know what to do with it. And I can tell you, people, all of this stuff that we see in their response is typical behaviour of someone who is caught like a rabbit in the headlights, when the truth is advancing, on someone who is hosting a lie. Lie carriers become jittery, they become defensive, they become aggressive when the truth comes to meet it. And lie carriers also do what these Jews did right here, which was to conveniently block out the convicting words and make an argument of what's left. Jesus said, if you stay in my word, you'll know the truth and the truth shall make you free. They said, how can you say you'll be made free? It's kind of like, well, where's all the bit about knowing the truth? All that's been sort of conveniently cast aside, hasn't it? Which really follows the Genesis format of slicing and dicing the word. Bless God. So anyway, time is gone. I'm going to have to sort of draw it to a close here. All I can say sort of in closing really is that their response to Jesus, on these words was not an honest response. The honest response would have been, what truth is that, Jesus? What do you mean? That's an honest response. There was nothing honest about this response. It was a response that came out of fear and intimidation. Because here's the reality, people. When the truth is on its way to behead the lie intimidates its host to keep it covered. And that intimidation looks and feels like fear. And this is how they responded to these incredible words. You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So we'll pick this up in the next session. Bless our lovely God, I'm all excited.